Hello, I'm Azai. Welcome back to the Fruit of Grisaia. Sorry, I haven't actually been recording this game for, let's see, I think the past week or so, maybe a week and a half. Reason being is that Digimon Survive came out and I was playing that. I don't know if it's actually worth it for me to have played that rather than, you know, Grisaia, because man, so far Digimon Survive has been quite the letdown. I am on part 6 right now, and part 5 did somewhat make it worthwhile, but god, there's just a lot of downtime where you don't do anything. But alright, let me try to remember what happened last time. I think Yuji and Sachi made a promise about meeting at a certain place, or you know, the usual place, right? And then Sachi was waiting at the park, turns out. And yeah, Yuji remembers that she was that girl that he was playing with when he was a kid. At the time I was playing this like a couple years back, I didn't really understand why it took Yuji such a long time to remember that. But it was also like something that I didn't think was going to happen, like, you know, Sachi being a childhood friend. Because when I was younger, I wasn't really good at, you know, looking at certain cues and foreshadowing. I'm a lot better now. Maybe a bit too good at guessing something nowadays. But yeah, Yuji has a childhood that he really just wants to forget. That's the reason why he never really has a lot of recollection or fond memories of the past. So I kind of get that now, playing back. Since it was said quite often during all the other routes, right? When he was talking about her sister or his sister, and even during Makina's route where he kept crying. I guess it was more subtle. So, like I said, I wasn't really good at picking up those cues. Kind of went over my head. Also, this might seem kind of random, but you guys remember that thing about the overhead projector? I forgot if it was in Makina's or Amane's route. Turns out, it wasn't the projector that I was thinking. The projector I was thinking was a digital projector at my school where you just connect an HDMI cable or a DVI cable and you show what's on your laptop. But an overhead projector is like a projector that basically shows you what's in front of it. It has like some sort of a camera or something, and it like enlarges it and puts it on the screen. I have that. My school had that, I mean, but it was like in middle school. The reason I know about this is because I watched a Linus Tech Tips video couple days prior, and they were talking about that. Alright, enough about that. Let's continue on with Grisaia. Sorry about my babble. Even after hearing Sachi's story, this is about as much as I can remember. As children, we parted abruptly. Our burgeoning friendship was cut off without warning. That must have happened when I was forced to move away after my sister's death. That much makes sense. But there's still one part of all this that I find completely inexplicable. I understand that Sachi has to be the same person who played with me as a child. But the girl in my memories was energetic and strong-willed in the extreme. A little spoiled even. Her personality and way of speaking were totally unlike the Sachi I know today. Of course, people naturally change as they grow up, but I don't know of many transformations that dramatic. Something must have triggered such a radical shift. I'd guess that something is connected to our conversation back then, but there's no way to know for sure until I learn more about Sachi's past. With what happened over the last 2 days, I think that's become necessary.
屋上で星を眺めるなんて意外にロマンチストなところがあったのね。
Ah, Chizuru.
私は学園長室で待っててって言ったはずだけど。
Sorry, felt like getting some air.
そう。
Dropping the line of questioning, Chizuru walks up the stand at my side.
各種への連絡と病院での手続きは一通り済ませてきたわ。
Appreciate it. Sorry to push all the work on you.
それは私のセリフよ。学生の管理は私の仕事だし、小峰さんだってあなたが見つけてくれたんだから。
True enough.
それより、あなたは小峰さんのそばにいてあげなくてもいいの？
She's got 4 dedicated nurses at the moment. I think she'll be alright.
それはそうだけど。でも、
Women don't like having men ogle them as they sleep, right?
まったく。こういう時に冗談が言えるのはあなたくらいのものだと思うわよ。
Blame my sister. I inherited it from her. But anyway,
他にやることができた。
Right. Remember what you told me a little while ago? How you don't expect me to do anything in particular for this school or its students?
ええ、確かにそう言ったわ。
I've got a follow-up question.
何かしら。
Are you willing to let me get involved on a voluntary basis?
ええ、もちろん。
Good to know. Sounds almost like she was expecting this from the very start. Guess there's a reason she's able to get by sitting around and sipping expensive tea all day.
でもいいの？これは市ヶ谷の任務でもないし、あなたにとって何の得にもならないことかもしれないわよ。
Oh, I thought she was gonna say more. It seemed like there was more text in what she said. No, but I didn't come to the school for duty or profit. You might say I'm here precisely because I wanted something more than that. Right. I wanted to understand the meaning of the words my master left me.
なるほどね。
Have we ever actually been told what his master told him? Also, in a way, I owe Sachi my life.
小峰さんが命の恩人？
Sachi and I knew each other as kids, and it's probably thanks to her that I managed to push my way through the worst of it.
驚いた。そんなことがあったなんて私も知らなかったわ。
Not surprising. I just remembered a little while ago myself.
そう。
Lowering her hand from the fence, Chizuru turns to face me.
でもそういう理由があったなら小峰さんだったのは納得ね。
Circumstances aside, simple truth is, Sachi caught my interest as she is today.
惹かれたか。それなら今度こそ小峰さんについての報告書を渡しましょうか。
Like I said before, that won't be necessary.
じゃあ断ることができない小峰さんから聞き出す？
That's not it either.
だったら
I'll handle this my way. In this case, maybe it's a pointlessly roundabout method, but I've gotten by with it all this time, so I'm going to stick with what I know.
なるほど。不器用だけどまっすぐであなたらしい考えね。
Was that supposed to be a compliment?
さあどうかしらね。
Blatantly evading the question, Chizuru offers me a composed smile. I personally also think that reading a file about someone is not like very tactful. But in the case of Makina, I think who we were dealing with was a bit too much for Yuji to do his roundabout but straightforward method. Alright, think it's about time I got going.
ええ、何か必要になったら遠慮なく言ってくれていいから。
I'm counting on it, Principal Tachibana. Well then, stepping outside the school grounds, I retrieve my cell phone from my pocket. Even if it does ultimately come down to asking for someone's help, I'll stick to the methods I trust most. If I want to change something, to accomplish something meaningful, I think that's the way it has to be. Julia, I need a favor. Have I told you guys how much I love this BGM? I think that's the umpteenth time I said that. Sorry.
案外気持ちよさそうに寝てるわね。まったくあれだけ心配させておいてのんきなもんよ。と見せかけてずっとこのままなんてオチは嫌なのよ。あんたはさらっとなんてこと言うのよ。それだけサッチンが心配なのよさ。心配しなくても平気よ。看護師さんから話を聞いた限りでは疲れて眠っているだけらしいから。それならよかったのよさ。でもユージ、よくさっちゃんを見つけられたわよね。そういえばそうよね。愛の力すげえな。
Sure, keep living in make-believe land, Machina.
やっぱりそうなのかしら。
What the fuck, Yumiko? You're supposed to be the straight girl out of this.
一番意外なところが食いついてきやがった。大はないわ。ただ最近仲良くしていたみたいだし、本当にそういう力が働いたのかと思っただけよ。
Really now?
やめてユミコ、キャラかぶってる上にうまいから。うまいってか、多分榊さんのは天然だからね。私は諦めないわよ。うなぎだって天然物より美味しい養殖物だってあるんだから。チルチル静かにしろよ。サッチンが起きちゃうのよさ。
Took the words out of my mouth, Machina.
あんたが煽ったくせに。それより本来の面会時間はとっくに過ぎているんだし、そろそろ戻った方がいいわ。そうね、着替えとかいろいろ用意しなくちゃいけないものもあるし。っていうか、ユージのバカはどこで何やってるのよ。俺はやることがあるってすぐどっかに行っちゃったからね。きっとその場に居合わせた人だからこそ分かったことがあるんでしょうね。こんな時までカッコつけなくてもいいのに。でもそこが好きなんだよな。さい。ほらほら、本当にさっちゃん起きちゃうからそろそろおいとまするわよ。分かってるわよ。じゃあさっち、すぐに戻ってくるから、それまでいい子にしてるのよ。
That was a very abrupt BGM stop. Mere moments after I pick up the sound of a well-tuned V8 engine approaching, a familiar yellow prancing horse pulls smoothly to a halt in front of my eyes.
お待たせ、ユージ。
And a split second later, the person I've been expecting emerges from the driver's seat.
もうこんな時間の呼び出しに海外しく答えるのは私ぐらいのものよ。
What time is it actually? Ooh, 12 o'clock. You're not wrong. Yeah, I do, and I appreciate it. When I offer a few straightforward words of thanks, JB furrows her brow. Something wrong?
皮肉を言ったつもりが真面目に返されちゃって何も言えなくなっただけよ。
My bad.
別に怒っているわけじゃないけど、この子が前に言ってたストレスを感じない子なんでしょ。
As JB speaks, she holds out a single manila envelope.
しかもそれ一応部外費の資料なのよ。
Right. That's why I had to ask you, Julia.
まあ頼まれて持ってくる私も私だけど。
Thanks. I owe you for this one.
なんだかユージが素直だと調子が狂うわ。
JB shrugs her shoulders as I take the documents from her hand. It's not that I don't trust Chizuru, but I prefer to get my information from a familiar, reliable source.
それから分かっているとは思うけど、その資料には先に目を通させてもらったわよ。
Yeah, not a problem.
この学園の子たちがそれぞれに問題を抱えているのは知っていたけど、その子もいろいろあったみたいね。
I see. I was more or less expecting JB to read the documents before handing them over. But judging from her vague language, it seems there was indeed something fairly dramatic inside.
これは純粋にあなたを知る友人として聞くけど、その子が抱える問題を知ってどうするつもりなの？
Don't know yet, but
でも
if there's something I can do for her after reading these, I think I will. JB answers my words with a searching gaze, her expression unusually serious. I stare steadily back into her eyes. For a moment, there's silence between us.
そう。あなたがそう考えているなら、私は何も言わないわ。
You're not opposed to the idea?
私にあなたのプライベートまで奪う権利はないし、そこまで言うからには、それなりの理由があるんでしょ？
In other words, you trust me.
そうね。これでもあなたのことはよく知ってるつもりよ。何せ私はあなたの友人であり、上司であり、保護者なんだから。
True enough. With my master and my older sister dead, JB's without a doubt the foremost living authority on the subject of me.
ただ一つだけ釘を刺させてもらうけど、あなたがこれから何をするにしても、仕事は今まで通りこなしてもらうわよ。
Yeah, of course. That was the plan.
その言葉が聞けて安心したわ。今は予備役扱いとはいえ、あなたを頼りにしている人間はたくさんいるんだから。
Apparently satisfied, JB gives me a friendly thump on the shoulder as she passes by.
それじゃあ、私はそろそろ戻るわね。
Right. I appreciate the help, JB.
感謝の気持ちを表すなら、今度高級イタリアンでもご馳走してちょうだい。
Returning to her usual playful tone, JB deftly brushes a loose strand of her thick golden hair into place, then steps back into her car. Yeah, I'll make a note. I do feel like JB is spoiling Yuji a bit too much, to be honest, but I guess that's her way of showing care. As the prancing horse grows small in the distance, I mutter wryly to myself. After returning to the courtyard, I sit down on a nearby bench and examine the contents of the envelope JB handed me. At a glance, it's 6 pages filled with text, almost certainly printed from a personal computer. So now I've got my hands on Sachi's past. What's more, I managed to obtain it quietly, from a source with absolutely no connection to these events. For JB, it was probably a simple job involving nothing more challenging than a few minutes of database crawling on a neglected terminal. But this way, if and how I make use of this information is completely up to me. Is she having a nightmare? When I open my eyes, I'm staring up at an unfamiliar ceiling. The lights are off and there's only faint illumination flowing in from the window. But as my eyes grow accustomed to the darkness, it doesn't take long for me to realize that I'm in a hospital.
そうか。私、公園で気を失って。
Kazami-san must have carried me here afterward. And judging from the tuna fish man figurine standing watch at my bedside, Maki-chan and the others paid me a visit.
風見さんは、ゆうくん。
Kazami-san and I played together as children. For a time, he was a very dear friend to me. I realized as much some time ago, but I don't believe that knowledge prompted any dramatic change inside me. Therefore, I had assumed the same was true for Kazami-san, that he had realized the truth long ago, and simply decided to keep things as they were. But in reality, he never associated me with the girl he knew back then. To him, the usual place was somewhere else entirely. The thought makes my heart ache. For some reason, when I close my eyes, I see Kazami-san's sorrowful face looking down at me in the playground. And as I remember that moment, the vice gripping my chest grows gradually tighter.
おかしいな。私もう悪い子じゃないはずなのに、みんなの言うことを聞くいい子でいれば、ここが痛くなることもないって思ってたのに。
The more I think, the more sluggish I feel. It's as though a heavy weight is pressing down on my body. Thank goodness I'm alone. If someone else had been here, I'm not sure I could have been my normal self for them. After all, I'm currently incapable of something as simple as reaching over to turn on the lights. Soon enough, my physical discomfort is accompanied by a building sense of panic, inexpressible in words. A horrible choking sensation crawls slowly but steadily up my throat. As I moan incoherently, my hands reflexively clutch at the blanket draped over my body. I squeeze my eyes tightly closed in an attempt to shut out reality. It's no good. The harder I try to repress my memory, the more clearly it rises to the surface. I know that it's the cause of my pain, but I simply can't escape that image. Perhaps it's because I'm weaker than usual after my long wait in the rain. Even as I wince at the first throbbing stabs of a sudden headache, an overwhelming weariness washes over my body. Just keeping my eyes open seems unbearably burdensome. My field of vision grows narrower as my eyelids fall halfway closed. I can faintly hear the sound of my clenched teeth rattling in my mouth. It feels as if the temperature of the room has plunged, to the point that I almost expect my breath to form white clouds before my eyes. I roughly gasp for air, panting like a dog, helplessly enduring the unceasing waves of pain. Eventually, it becomes difficult to tell whether my eyes are open or shut, and as my physical agony reaches its climax, it's joined by an unfathomably profound sense of loss. My trembling hands creep upward, seeking reassurance that my head hasn't simply been lopped off at the neck. It's alright. That couldn't possibly have happened. She's getting an anxiety attack, Jesus. I understand that rationally, but the delusion is so vivid that I can't bring myself to lower my hands. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. As a child, when I first suffered these symptoms, the doctor who examined me dispassionately offered that diagnosis: a severe mental illness brought on by violent wounds to the mind, leading to a persistent range of stress-related impediments. I've researched the disorder and its symptoms in great detail over the years from every source I could find. Among the many symptoms, the one I truly fear is clinically referred to as recurrent involuntary memory, more commonly known as the flashback. If I curl my body into a tight ball like this, I can endure the pain and exhaustion somehow. But the worst of the suffering is yet to come. As I begin to imagine that moment, tears flood out of my eyes and I shake my head from side to side, like a spoiled child throwing a temper tantrum. Lukewarm drool dribbles out of my gaping mouth as I'm racked by dry heaves. At some point, my groans give way to convulsive sobs. This is how it always happens. After enduring the pain, I see the dream. The memories I've tried so very hard to forget force their way into my mind, still vivid and clear after all this time. The profound darkness, buried deep inside by my own conscious efforts, pushes its way back to the surface. How many times have I seen this dream since that day? The mere idea of trying to count seems rather ridiculous by now. I'll never escape this nightmare, will I? Never. It'll be with me for all eternity. And the nightmare begins, as always, with two words.
おっす。
Damn, you're loud, Sachi.
おかえりなさい、サッチ。
今日の学校は楽しかったか？
The workshop was constantly filled with the clamor of industrial machines. But when I shouted out the greeting, my parents never failed to put down their work and answer. My gentle mother, who always smelled like freshly dried laundry, and my smiling father, whose face was constantly smeared with grease and oil. I loved them both very much. My earliest memories, from the days before I entered elementary school, are all wonderfully happy. My dad was a metal worker and engineer from Niigata, and my mom was born into a family that operated a small precision manufacturing workshop in Kanagawa. About 20 years ago, they met at a technology fair and fell in love. Soon enough, they'd started up a little factory of their own on the outskirts of this small city. I was born shortly thereafter, completing an intimate little family of 3.
あなた、どうしましょう。サチが泣き止まないわ。
熱もあるみたいだし、すぐに病院へ連れて行こう。
でも、夕方までに納品の仕事がまだ。
そんなのは後で頭を下げればなんとかなる。それより、サチの命の方が大事だ。
はい。
The orders placed at that freshly established workshop tended to be small in scale, and its track record couldn't have been called excellent, even as polite flattery. The primary cause, my parents prioritized their newborn child above all else, frequently missing important deadlines for my sake. But despite their inconsistent job performance, their character won respect and affection. Our young family was able to get by thanks to the support of others.
ねえねえ、お母さん、お買い物一緒に行こう。そうね、そろそろお夕飯の準備もしないといけないんだけど。
ああ、仕事の方は心配しないでいいから、2人で行ってくるといい。
すみません、あなた。
いいさ、どうせもうすぐ片付くしね。
じゃあ、お父さんの好きなおビールも買ってくる。
ありがとう、サチ。
Every once I got a little bigger, I still spent lots of time with my parents. Oh, sorry, I was like, what the hell was I saying there? Even once I got a little bigger, I still spent lots of time with my parents. Sorry, I was like, kinda lost in thought while this flashback is happening. I feel like I kinda understand why I like Sachi so much now, after reading this again. Especially in the evenings, I'd always pull at my mom's hand and beg her to go shopping with me.
サチは今日何が食べたい？卵ふりかけ。ふりかけじゃなくて、ハンバーグとかすき焼きとか、もっと好きなものを言っていいのよ。じゃあね、サメさん。
You can't eat shark. I mean, technically you can't eat just the shark fin. But I guess if you eat everything else, it's not that bad. Though I do hear in some places it's illegal still.
サメさんはちょっと。
And they're also pretty damn expensive.
サメさん食べられない？そうね。サチはサメが好きなのは知ってるけど、できれば別のものにしてほしいかな。それならサチ、タコさんウインナーがいい。ごめんね、サチ。どうしてお母さんが謝るの？サチ、お母さんが作ってくれる目玉焼きとタコさんが一番大好きだよ。ありがとう。私もサチのことが大好きよ。
あら、さっちゃん、今日もお母さんと一緒でいいわね。
Thinking back on it now, Our household has definitely... Our household was definitely on the poor side. You could count on one hand the number of times per year a real treat of a meal graced our dinner table. But Mom's cooking was always delicious anyway. And more importantly, I loved the feeling of her soft, warm hand wrapping around mine. Fortunately, the adults around us watched over our family with warm gazes and small acts of kindness.
じゃあこいつはサービスだ。
いつもすみません。
いやいや、うちも駅向こうにできたスーパーのせいで大変なんだが、小峰さんには変わらずひいきにしてもらってるからね。
ありがとうございます。
おじさん、いつもおまけしてくれてありがとう。
お、その年でちゃんとお礼が言えるた偉いね、さっちゃんは。よーし、それならおじさん、唐揚げ用のお肉もサービスしちゃおう。
本当にすみません。
こりゃ後でかみさんに怒られちまうかもな。
あなた、今日も一日お疲れ様です。
あ、お前もお疲れ様。
お疲れ様。
Surrounded by Mom's cooking, we thanked each other for our daily labors as Dad tilted his beer glass. When the dishes in front of us were about halfway gone and the glass sat empty in front of him, Dad would always sit back in his chair and start to tell me a story.
なあ、サチ。サチはエッチングって知ってるかい？
聞いたことない。
I feel like I've heard of it.
あなた、サチはまだ5歳ですよ。今からそんなことを知っている方がおかしいわ。
そうかな。俺がサチくらいの頃には親父の仕事場に潜り込んでは勝手に機械をいじってたもんだったわ。
だってサチ、工場の機械を触ってるよりもお人形さんと遊んでる方が楽しいもん。
やっぱりそうか。サチは女の子だもんな。
サチは大きくなったらお母さんみたいなお母さんになるの。
サチ。
おお、サチは嬉しいこと言ってくれるな。じゃあおもちゃのお人形さんを作っていたお父さんの親戚の家の話をしてあげよう。
お人形さんの話だったらサチ聞きたい。
Dad's stories were almost always connected to his job somehow. Even so, it was fun to hear about new things, and I was in awe of him for knowing all that super complicated stuff. But what always impressed me more than anything else was his amazing handiness.
お父さん、この時電池を変えても動かないの。
どれどれ。通電してないみたいだな。配線のハンダ付けがいい加減だったんだろう。
時計また動くようになる？
あ、これくらいならすぐに治るぞ。
お父さんすごい。
壊れた時計くらいならお母さんの機嫌を直すより簡単さ。
Dad loved playing with machines from a very young age, so he could repair almost anything. Because of that, the things we bought tended to last much longer than they would normally. And I always thought of him as some kind of a wizard. What the? New BGM?
ねえねえ、お父さん、それ何？
ああ、これはオルゴールって言うんだ。
オルゴール？
この箱を開けるとね、音が鳴るような仕掛けになっているの。
I actually wanted to buy myself a custom music box that had some of these BGM from VNs before. I don't know if there's an actual music box factory though here in Indonesia. At least I don't think there is.
へえ、そうなんだ。
サチはオルゴールを見るの初めてだったかしら？
それにね、なんだかすごく素敵な音がした。
あら、サチは素敵なんて言葉よく知っていたわね。
昨日見たテレビで言ってたの。
なるほど。それでサチはこの曲のことを素敵だなって思ってくれたのね。
とっても綺麗な音だった。
そう。サチがそう言ってくれるとお母さん嬉しいわ。
どうして？
このオルゴールに入っている曲はね、お父さんとお母さんの結婚式で流した思い出の曲なんだ。
結婚式？
そうね。好きな人と幸せになるためにする約束みたいなもののことよ。
幸せ。
幸せっていう字はね、サチの名前と同じ字を書くの。
そうなの？
そう。だからサチも大きくなったら好きな人と結婚して、きっと幸せになれるわよ。
そっか。じゃあサチも大きくなったらお父さんとお母さんと結婚する。
I don't think that's how that works, but okay.
お母さん、うちにボイスレコーダーはあったかな？
Damn you, doting parents.
もう、何言ってるんですか、あなたは。
お父さんはサチと結婚したら嬉しい？
ああ、嬉しすぎてサチのことがもっともっと好きになっちゃうな。
そっか。
でも、好きな人と結婚するためには、サチがもっと大きくならなくっちゃね。
サチもっと大きくなれるようにたくさん牛乳飲む。
From that day forth, the sound of that music box became a familiar part of my life. The gentle melody that accompanied our family gatherings felt almost like a symbol of happiness itself. I'd always understood that Dad loved me just as much as Mom, although he was often busy with work. And since I happened to love him very much myself, I had a habit of begging him to play with me on the weekends.
ねえねえ、お父さん、お外に遊びに行こ
おお、サチはいつも元気だな。
う。日曜日はね、お外でお父さんと遊ぶ日って決めてるの。
そうか。
だからお父さんも一緒に遊ばないとダメなんだよ。
そうだな。じゃあ今日はお父さんと公園でキャッチボールをしようか。
キャッチボール？
よーし、いいぞ。そしたらここにめがけてそのボールを投げるんだ。
ボールを投げる。
おお、うまいじゃないかサチ。初めてでここまでできるなんてすごいぞ。
本当？
ああ、お父さんは運動ダメだったけど、そういうところはお母さんに似てくれてよかったよ。
I think Dad probably wanted a boy. Not that he ever came out and admitted it, of course. But when he watched me tossing a baseball around or playing soccer, his eyes were livelier than usual. Once I caught on, I started begging him to play with me even on weekdays, eager to see that happy expression on his face. But of course, Dad had his work to take care of, so he couldn't tag along every time. As a result, I sometimes had too much time on my hands. One particularly dull afternoon, I decided on a total whim to imitate Mom and clean the floor of the workshop. And when I did,
あらサチ、ほうきなんか持って何してるの？
お掃除だよ。
偉いじゃない、サチ。進んでお手伝いをしてくれるなんて、お母さんとっても嬉しいわ。ねえ、聞いてあなた。サチが工場を掃除してくれていたのよ。
何？本当か？
ええ、あなたもこっちに来てサチのことを褒めてあげてください。
damn these doting parents. As my parents showered me in compliments, almost like the time I'd brought home the first prize for a picture I'd drawn in kindergarten, I blushed with joy. Their initial reaction was surprising enough, but after work that day, both Dad and Mom came outside to play with me.
お母さん、こっちこっち。
サチもいつの間にかそんなに速く走れるようになっていたのね。
それより2人とも少しは手加減してくれ。こっちの体力が持たないよ。
ダメ、今日はサチ、お母さんと一緒にお父さんをやっつけるんだもん。
そうね、そうしましょうか。
おいおい、勘弁してくれよ。
We laughed and played until evening came. For one day, the machine sat silent in the workshop. In exchange, our house was filled with the resounding melody of the music box. And from that shining moment, I was left with a powerful new conviction. It makes Mommy and Daddy happy when I clean up. If I do it again, they'll play with me more. Motivated by that simple thought, I began to clean the workshop and our house whenever I had the time.
ほら、お父さん、お母さん、お仕事はもう終わったんだから一緒に遊ぼう。
わかったわかった。もうすぐ片付くから、せめて着替える時間くらいは待ってくれよ、サチ。
ダメだよ、早くしないと砂場が他の人に占領されちゃうんだから。
もうサチったら。
And sure enough, whenever I cleaned up for them, my parents would emerge from the workshop with resigned smiles on their faces. After witnessing that same scene play out countless times, I'm sure the neighbors had me down as a slightly spoiled little tomboy. Not that I noticed at the time, so caught up in every precious moment. Back then, my world consisted of nothing but the things before my eyes, the places my short legs could carry me, and it was more than enough. But eventually, my way of thinking did undergo a clear change. That day, a little while into my first year of elementary school, I proudly brought home my first perfect test.
すごい。本当に100点だわ。ちょっとあなた、ちゃんと聞いてます？
ああ、すまない。あまりの驚きで思わず呼吸が止まってしまっていたよ。
いくらなんでもそれは驚きすぎですよ。
そうだよ、お父さん。
いやいや、決してそんなことはないぞ。お父さんも何度か100点は取ったことがあるが、算数のテストで取ったことはなかった。サチは運動神経がいいだけじゃなくて頭もいいんだな。
そうね、今日はサチが初めて100点を取ったお祝いに腕によりをかけてごちそうを作らないと。
本当？やったー！
At the time, I was a very simple person. Being praised makes me happy. When I do well on tests, Mom and Dad are really nice. And the food at dinner gets better too. In that case, I'm gonna get good scores every time. Having reached that conclusion, I shifted my efforts to my studies. I always listened carefully in school, and at home I'd voluntarily head off to my desk and pore over my books.
今度は社会科のテストで100点か。
クラスで100点を取れたのは私だけだって先生も褒めてくれたよ。
最近はうちでも勉強を頑張っているみたいだし、学期末にもらえる通知表が楽しみね。
The harder I tried, the more my parents complimented me. The more effort I put in, the wider the smiles on their faces. That was all there was to it. But simple as I was, that was more than enough to motivate me. As I focused on that clear objective, my grades soared with astonishing swiftness.
はい、今日は サチが全部4以上の通知表をもらってきたお祝いよ。
手巻き寿司だ。
サチは最近頑張ってくれているから、その分私たちもお返ししなくちゃね。
お返し？
そうだぞ。何かのために努力するってことは口で言うほど簡単じゃない。だからそれができたサチのことを褒めるのは当然のことなんだ。
そっか。
あ、今回はサチが頑張ったご褒美にお父さんが何でも買ってあげるぞ。
何でもなんて言ってしまっていいんですか？
たまにはいいさ。ほら、何でもいいから言ってごらん、サチ。
欲しいものはあんまりないかも。
え？
お父さんとお母さんに褒めてもらえてお寿司が食べられるならもう何もいらないよ。
サチ。
Those are my true feelings. Of course, sometimes I did look at the pretty new clothes my friends wore and feel a little envious. And I sort of wanted to visit those fancy amusement parks they talked about on TV too. But when I went home after school, Mom and Dad were always waiting. The music box played its beautiful song in the background, and the people I loved had smiles in their faces. That was more than enough for me. But those tranquil days didn't last forever. One day, word got out that Dad's family had received a contract for grinding lenses that would be used on a space shuttle, leading to media interest in a TV interview. We'd contributed intricate metal molds that were now valuable manufacturing assets. With the sudden burst of publicity, a few major orders started trickling down to our workshop as well. Dad had always been skilled, and now he had the chance to prove it. In the blink of an eye, rumors were spreading about the high-quality precision dies our workshop produced. Before we knew it, our little branch of the business was flooded with more orders than even his parents' workshop. A year or so after these events, my life had changed dramatically. Back from school, I yelled out a greeting to the workshop from force of habit, but there was no answer from Mom and Dad. Instead, I was welcomed home by the drone of industrial machines, a constant companion from morning through night. On the dining table, a gorgeous meal was waiting for me, but the clouds of steam that proved the food was freshly made were missing. The pencils I used to wear down to the nub had all been replaced with nice new pens, but I no longer heard Dad's encouraging voice at my side as I studied. I could wear all sorts of brand new clothes, but Mom didn't sew sharp appliques onto my dresses anymore. Among all these, what hurt most was the simplest change of all. I no longer spent much time with my parents. Producing metal dies is precision manufacturing, requiring both high technical knowledge and natural skill. It was extremely difficult to find qualified new employees for such a small business. Dealing with a workload that had suddenly doubled with the same number of people as before, there was no choice but to increase working hours proportionately. The amount of time Mom and Dad spent in the house became extremely limited, and the amount of time I spent alone grew dramatically. Even so, I wanted their attention just as badly as before. Sometimes I would sit up waiting, rubbing my drowsy eyes until the machines finally fell quiet.
お疲れ様、お父さん、お母さん。
ああ、サチか。
こんな時間まで起きていたの？
どうしてもお父さんとお母さんに見てもらいたいものがあったの。
見てもらいたいもの？
ほら見て、今日は初めて理科のテストで100点を取ったんだよ。
おお、そうか。偉いな、サチは。
おめでとう、サチ。
And when I did, my parents would still listen to what I had to say. But even then, they didn't smile like before. Their faces were always lined with exhaustion, their eyes dull. I knew they were busy because Dad's family had been on TV. I just had to tough it out a little longer and things would be back to normal. I did my best to believe that. I waited as patiently as I could for my parents to get less busy. But rather than diminishing, the work kept pouring steadily in. Even after 3 months, then half a year, the situation didn't improve in the slightest. In fact, things eventually got so frantic that my parents hired a housekeeper to look after things. She cooked and took care of the laundry in Mom's place. She accepted the handouts I brought home. When there was a parents' night at school, she was the one who showed up. The housekeeper was a diligent person who took her job seriously, and she was always nice to me. But that wasn't enough. For some reason, I never felt particularly happy when the housekeeper patted my head gently and praised my achievements. So one day, taking advantage of a brief pause in the feverish activity in my parents' workshop, I rushed up to Mom and tried to show off my latest test.
ごめんね、サチ。お母さん、これから取引先の会社さんに行かないといけないの。
何時になったら帰ってくるの？
多分、とても遅くなるから、また今度ね。
せっかく苦手だった国語のテストで100点を取ったのに。
For the first time, I couldn't get her to even glance at the paper. I still remember the shock and anger I felt. Crumpling the test into a ball, I threw it into a trash can. And on the night I turned 9 years old, neither Mom or Dad were waiting for me. Instead, I was greeted by a feast our housekeeper had prepared, and a pile of presents stacked up on the table. But I didn't have the slightest interest in the food in front of me, much less the colorfully wrapped boxes. This stuff isn't what I wanted. The only thing on my mind was conveying that simple truth to my parents, and so I sat and I waited. Even when the clock ticked past 9 and our housekeeper headed home, even when unfamiliar shows started to appear on the television, which I'd left on so I could hear the sound of human voices, I didn't budge. And a little after the hour hand on the clock crept past 11, the clamor of the machines finally came to a stop.
これで明日までには納品できるだろう。
でも、すぐに次の仕事にかからないと。
そうだな。ってサチ。
もしかして私たちの仕事が終わるのを待っていてくれたの？
そうか。それは悪いことをしたな。おお、そうだ。遅くなってしまったけど、9歳の誕生日おめでとう。
おめでとう、サチ。最近サチには寂しい思いをさせてしまったから、プレゼントも大奮発したのよ。どうしたの？サチ、お腹でも痛くなった？
よく見たらご飯も全然食べていないじゃないか。
いらない。プレゼントもごちそうもいらない。だから一人でステーキを食べるより、機械の音が聞こえないお家でみんな一緒にカレーが食べたい。
Before I knew it, the words had slipped out of my mouth, and tears were running down my cheeks. Those were the words I'd kept shut away tightly inside ever since the workshop got busy. My honest, selfish feelings. For the first time in a while, I was the spoiled little girl again. As soon as the words left my mouth, my parents' eyes opened wide with surprise. When that shock gave way to awkward, troubled expressions, I realized the mistake I just made. I just said something really mean to Mom and Dad. The instant I understood how selfish my words had been, my heart started to throb painfully in my chest. I stood up from the table and ran from the room, trying to escape the sudden wave of guilt. God, she's not stopping. Dashing into my room, I burrowed down into the futon and cried my eyes out. I was angry at my parents, who couldn't spare a single night for me even on my birthday. And I was angry at myself for being cruel to my exhausted parents, who'd been forced to work by circumstances beyond their control. Tormented by this jumbled mixture of intense emotions, I cried into my pillow until morning came. That was my 9th birthday. After that miserable day, I decided to change my way of thinking and start fresh. Maybe finally saying what I'd kept locked inside helped. Maybe all the crying got all the poison out of my system. Either way, I found a new conviction to cling to. If what I've been doing isn't enough, I'll just have to try even harder. Not merely devoting myself to my studies, I began to actively volunteer for class representative and other student government duties. I threw myself into anything that seemed like it might put smiles on my faces and on my parents' faces, even learning to play the music box song they love so much. Probably because of that broad, spirited effort, my results at school rose so high that I broke the top 10 lists for our year. Grades other than A disappeared from my report card entirely, and the comments were increasingly filled with effusive praise about how I'd become an example for the other students. But even then...
お父さん、今日は終業式だったから通知表もらってきたよ。
おお、もうそんな季節か。
それでね、今回は私、評価の数字が全部5だったの。
じゃあ、この仕事が終わったらじっくり見せてもらうから、もう少しだけ待っててくれるか？
もういい。
In the end, nothing changed. Even when I brought home a straight A report card for the first time, Mom and Dad didn't pay attention to me like they used to. If the best possible results weren't good enough, it could only mean that my parents had started to hate me. No matter how good my grades got, it wouldn't make them start loving me again. They were probably working really hard on their jobs so they could get enough money to run away together. The more I thought, the more dejected I felt. Why had I even bothered to try so hard all that time? Before I knew it, my legs had carried me to the neighborhood park where we'd once played together as a family.
ここは何も変わらない。真ん中にある丸いベンチも、テントウムシの横にある砂場もずっと同じ。
But I might never be able to play there again, not like I had before. I'm the saddest kid in the world, abandoned by my own parents. It was only a few moments after I convinced myself of this that I noticed the mysterious boy. He wasn't doing a thing, just sitting quietly on a swing, staring off into space. I'd always thought of the park as a place where everyone played all the time, so that motionless boy struck me as out of place. What's that kid doing over there? Only a few seconds after that first twinge of curiosity, I walked right up to him.
ねえ、ねえ、私の声聞こえてる？
Huh?
だから私の声聞こえてる？それとも聞こえてない？
If I couldn't hear you, I don't think I'd be able to answer.
ああ、そっか。そういえばそうだよね。
So, did you want something?
うん。あなたは何をしているのかが気になって。
Well, I wasn't doing anything, I guess.
何それ？
Well, my sister told me that sometimes people need to spend some time doing nothing at all.
へえ、あなたのお姉さんって面白いこと言う人なんだね。
Yeah, that's what everyone says.
でも公園は遊具がたくさんあるところなんだから、ブランコとかジャングルジムで遊んだ方が楽しいでしょ。そう思わない？
Yeah, you're probably right.
じゃあ一緒に遊ぼうよ。
Huh?
私はここで遊びたいって思ってて、あなたも公園は遊ぶところだと思ってる。だったら一緒に遊ばない理由はないでしょ。ほら行こう。
The boy looked so painfully bored that even the saddest kid in the world had forgotten to feel sorry for herself. As he blinked up at me, completely dumbfounded, I grabbed him by the hand and pulled him along after me. That was how I met Yukun.
まずは何をして。で、そうだ。
What's wrong?
あなたの名前を聞くの忘れてた。
Yeah, I guess you did.
じゃあ改めて、あなたのお名前は？
Yuji. Kazami Yuji.
ユージくんか。じゃあこれからユウくんって呼ばせてもらうね。
Huh?
そっちの方が呼びやすいでしょ。
What's your name then?
私の名前はサチ。小峰サチっていうの。
Shachi. Like an orca?
ねえユウくん、パンチしていい？グーで。
Sorry.
それから私の呼び方もユウくんが好きに決めてくれていいからね。
Okay then. I guess I'll go with Sachan.
やっぱりさっちゃんか。
I mean, nothing else really comes to mind.
そうだよね。
After this brief exchange of introductions, we immediately got down to the business at hand.
じゃあ最初はあれからだよ、ユウくん。
The jungle gym?
そう、まずはどっちが早くてっぺんまで登れるかの勝負だからね。
Wait, hold on a second. After deciding the event on a whim, I forcibly started the game. Yukun didn't have many suggestions himself, but when I pulled on his arm, he'd follow. Pretty heavy-handed, I know. Anyway, we must have been fairly evenly matched in reflexes and strength. Every game was a competitive match. I was always the winner, of course, but only by a narrow margin. That made the games much more fun, so I just kept going and going. Before I knew it, the sun had begun to sink below the horizon. Oh, I think I need to go home pretty soon.
もうそんな時間になってたんだ。
Yeah, we ended up playing a whole lot.
ごめんね、遅くまで付き合わせちゃって。
That's okay. It'll be fine as long as I head straight home.
それならよかった。
Yeah,
それじゃあバイバイ、ユウくん。
bye. Thanks for playing with me today. Kinda weird for the person who got dragged around all day to say thanks to the person who was doing the dragging. It was also odd that I thought about Yukun the whole way back home. I ended up so lost in thought that I barely touched the meal our housekeeper had made for me. Once he actually started playing, I think he enjoyed it just as much as I did. But when I was trying to think up new games, or when we stopped for a break, Yukun went right back to the expression I saw on his face at the start. Why was Yukun in that playground in the first place? It obviously wasn't to play. Maybe something bad happened at his home too. Partly out of simple curiosity, I decided that I wanted to see Yukun again. The very next day, I made my way back to the playground. And sure enough, he was sitting on this exact same swing with the exact same downcast look on his face.
こんにちは、ユウくん。
Hi.
今日は最初から返事をしてくれたね。
Well, yeah. And you said hello to me again, Sachan.
だって昨日一緒に遊んだんだから私たちはもうお友達でしょ。
Friends?
それともまだ早すぎたか
No. Thanks for calling me your friend. Did I say something weird?
な。そうじゃないけどゆうくんはよくありがとうって言うなと思って。
That's something else my sister told me. People who can offer thanks to others have a happier road through life than people who can't, so...
ゆうくんはお姉さんのことが好きなんだね。
Huh?
だって昨日もお姉さんの名前が出てきたから。
I guess I did, now that you mention it.
じゃあやっぱり
Yeah. Sometimes I don't really understand what my big sister's thinking. And sometimes she's even kind of scary. But she's normally really nice to me. I think I love her more than anyone else in my family.
そっか。でも今度は私もゆうくんのお姉さんに賛成する。
Really?
私のお母さんも言ってたんだ。誰かによくしてもらった時はちゃんとお礼を言いなさいって。
So I guess you love your mom, Sachan. Since you brought up her advice.
そうだね。私はお母さんとお父さんのことが大好き。
No kidding. As the conversation moved along, we slowly learned more about each other. That was surprisingly fun in its own way.
ねえゆうくん、せっかくまた会えたんだし今日も一緒に遊ぼうよ。
I don't mind, but is it really any fun playing with someone like me?
もちろんだよ。ゆうくんも運動は得意みたいだしどの勝負も接戦だったから昨日はすごく面白かったよ。
Thanks. It's nice of you to say that.
ゆうくんまたありがとうって言った。
Ah, you're right. But that was fine by me. For some reason, every time Yukun said thanks in that slightly bashful voice, I felt genuinely happy.
そういえばゆうくんは何歳？
I'm 10.
じゃあ私の方が年下だったんだ。
Huh? Seriously? I was so sure it was the other way around.
じゃあゆうくんは私の方が年上だと思ってたんだ。
I mean, you're stronger than me, and I'm a boy.
あ、ゆうくんってばひどい。私が怪力女みたいな言い方して。
Sorry.
そんなに怒ってるわけじゃないから謝らなくても大丈夫だよ。
Really? That's good. I'd only been trying to tease the slightly timid Yukun a bit, but when he smiled with sincere relief to learn that I wasn't upset with him, I was surprised to feel my heart flutter briefly in my chest.
そういえばゆうくんはどうしてこの公園に来るようになったの？もしかして聞いたらダメなことだったかな？
No, it's okay. I just came here because I didn't want to be at home.
やっぱり家で何か嫌なことがあったの？
Not really anything bad, but I didn't want to be in the way.
だな。
Yeah. You might not believe it, but my sister's what they call a genius. If she just studies a little, she can win first prize at anything. That's how smart she is.
すごいんだね、ゆうくんのお姉さんって。
Yeah. But lately she hasn't been winning that many awards. At home, she's been paying more attention to me than her paintings and stuff. Dad got really angry when he noticed that. He told me, "You're useless trash, but Kazuki's actually worth something. Don't drag her down with you." So I try to stay out of the house as much as I can, to keep out of my sister's way. Sorry. Not really an interesting story, is it?
なんかじゃない。絞りかすなんかじゃない。
Huh?
ひどいよ、そんなこと言うお父さん。ゆうくんは出来損ないなんかじゃない。ゆうくんは運動が
が得意だし、ゆうくんと一緒に遊ぶのはすごく楽しい。それなのにお姉さんの絞りかすだなんてひどすぎるよ。
Sa-chan,
ゆうくんはゆうくんでいいんだよ。だから自分はいらない子だなんて思っちゃダメだからね。
I hadn't intended to cry, but I really was angry at Yukun's stupid dad. And the way he didn't belong in his own home reminded me so much of my own problems. They sort of got jumbled together in my mind. I couldn't help shouting that it wasn't true, that I, wasn't unwanted. Sorry. Don't cry, Sa-chan.
私の方こそごめんね。急に泣いちゃったりして。
It's okay. Thanks for getting mad for me.
違うの、私が怒ったのは。
Because something bad happened at home, right? But that doesn't matter. You still got angry because of what my dad said.
だってゆうくんが出来損ないなんかじゃないと思ったのは本当だし。
Yeah. So in return, I'll play anything you want today. For as long as you want.
いいの？
Uh-huh.
じゃあ公園鉄人レースでもいい？
Playground Iron Man.
これを初めてやろうとした時はお父さんが腰を痛めて途中でリタイアになっちゃったんだけど、最初は砂場のお城作りから始まって10回連続逆上がりとか運転2往復なんかもあって、最後は1回転できるまでのエンドレスブランコっていうプログラムなんだよ。
That sounds a little...
じゃあゆうくんが家に帰らないといけない時間まで昨日みたいに遊ぶなら？
Yeah, I'd be glad to.
じゃあ決まりだね。
I firmly wiped the tears from my eyes, then seized Yukun's hand, and set off running for the seesaw. From that moment, the days sped past in a blur. Covered in sand, the two of us explored every inch of the park, playing and playing until well past the time we had to leave. And when I finally made my way home on that second night, I discovered a clear and pleasant change inside myself. For months, the droning sound of the machines from the workshop had bothered me so much that falling asleep was always a struggle. But that day, I was snoring peacefully away the moment my head hit the pillow. Exhaustion from running around all day definitely had something to do with it. But more than anything else, I think it was because I suddenly felt so happy. In the park where I might never play again with my family, I'd stumbled across a nice boy my age. He was a sweet kid who said thank you at the drop of a hat, so things would definitely go well. We'd be best friends in no time. For some reason, I felt absolutely certain of that. As it turned out, my hunch was on the money. After those first few meetings, Yukon and I started playing together in the park pretty much every day. At first, we headed home quietly when the sun began to set, but after a while, we naturally started to say, "See you tomorrow." And when one of us couldn't make it for whatever reason, we'd let the other know in advance. Is 10:30 supposed to be this late in the evening? It's at 10:30, right? Sa-chan, what are you doing over there?
何ってゴミを拾ってるんだよ。
Yeah, but why?
だって次にこの場所で遊んだ時綺麗だった方が嬉しいでしょ。
Oh, this is Yuji's same memory that he remembered. Wow, you're so thoughtful, Sa-chan. I mean, lots of people might think the same thing, but that doesn't mean they'd clean up the mess themselves. And you did it without even thinking about it. You're kind of amazing. Did I say something weird again?
久しぶりに褒められたからちょっとびっくりして。
You haven't?
昔はね、私が頑張ったら お父さんとお母さんが褒めてくれてたんだけど、今は仕事が忙しいみたいだから。
Okay. In that case, I guess I'll have to take over that job for now. It doesn't seem hard to find stuff to praise about you. I think even I can handle this one. That okay with you?
それはいいけど。
Okay, in that case, good job, Sachan. With those words, Yukon brought his hand to rest on top of my head. It was far smaller than Mom's hand, let alone Dad's, and yet, in that moment, his hand felt gentler and warmer than any other I'd known.
ありがとう、ゆうくん。
Yukon didn't just play with me, he gave me the attention I'd been craving. When I did well or tried hard, he'd compliment me right away. When I messed up or tried something risky, he'd give me a few gentle words of concern. Apparently that also had something to do with his big sister's teachings, but whatever the case, Yukon's thoughtful warnings made me almost as happy as his praise. Lately, I'd started to wonder why I was trying so hard when no one even cared enough to look. But now, Yukon was watching me. I had a new reason to do my best.
それじゃあ見ててね。行くよ。
Yeah. Be careful, okay?
どうどう、私ちゃんとできてたかな。
Yeah. You spun all the way around perfectly.
ありがとう。
She like doing a backflip? That's pretty amazing. Not that I'm much good at the horizontal bar or anything, but I've never done a forward flip even once.
そんなにすごくはないと思うけど、今日初めて成功したから最初はゆうくんに見てほしかったんだ。
Oh, really? Thanks, Sachan. Huh?
これはいつも私と遊んでくれているお礼だよ。
Yeah, thanks. When I tried hard at something, Yukon would always praise me. Sometimes, overflowing with happiness, I'd give him a kiss on the cheek in return. And more than once, I drove myself so hard in pursuit of some new achievement that I ended up passing out on the playground. That was how much Yukon's words meant to me. He had stepped into the gap left by my parents' absence, giving me the attention and affection they no longer would. As I grew more and more conscious of what he meant to me, my daily life was quickly transformed. I spent less and less time inside the house. When I got home from school, I head straight off to the playground. More than anything else, I looked forward to the time I could spend playing with Yukon. At home, the constant grinding of the machines and the perpetual silence of our music box were still painful, but I found I could endure them now. Not to say that I didn't interact with my parents at all.
サチは最近よく公園で遊んでるみたいね。
うん、ゆうくんってことお友達になれたから。
そう、よかったわね。
うん、お母さんもお仕事頑張ってね。
When coincidence brought us together, we were able to hold slightly awkward but reasonably friendly conversations. Even so, I had stopped actively trying to regain their attention. In contrast to the steadily shrinking place my parents held in my heart, Yukon's presence grew larger and larger by the day. I wish it'd hurry up and be tomorrow so I can play with Yukon again. It didn't take long for those feelings to blossom into a faint but unmistakable love.
ね、ゆうくんは好きな人とかいるの？
Like I said before, I guess my sister.
そういう好きじゃなくて結婚したい人とか。
Mary? I haven't even thought about that stuff yet. Sachan, are you thinking about it already?
私？
Well, you brought it up, so I thought you were probably interested.
そっか。そうだよね。
Yeah, so do you have someone you want to marry? No kidding. Okay, then
でもね、私と結婚するには条件があるの。
qualified.
そう、靴飛ばしで私より靴が飛ばせる
Shoe kicking.
人。こうやってブランコに座ったままでどこまで靴を遠くに飛ばせるかっていう勝負なんだけど。
Ah, I get it.
だからね、ちょっとだけゆうくんもやってみない？
Huh? Me?
ゆうくんが私より靴を飛ばせるかちょっとだけ試してみるの。
Sounds kind of fun, I guess. Sure, I'll play.
じゃあまずは私からね。
Confident, huh? Well, it does seem like something you'd be good at, Sachan. Whoa, that went pretty far.
じゃあ次はゆうくんの番だよ。
Yeah, I'm not that confident, but... Yeah! Guess I can't beat you after all, Sachan. I purposely went a little easy on my kick, but I still ended up beating Yukun. Every once in a while, being naturally athletic can be a curse instead of a blessing. I spent that night curled up in my bed, bitterly regretting coming up with that stupid qualification in the first place. There must have been a better way to hide my embarrassment than that. And so, time slipped steadily by, my feelings unspoken. But as my next birthday grew near, my relationship with Yukun started to change in a different way.
それでね、その時はお父さんがお母さんのことを怒らせちゃって。で、ゆうくん？
Oh, sorry. I was kind of spacing out.
もう、ゆうくんが私の家のこと聞きたいって言うから一生懸命お話ししたのに。
Yeah, you're right. Sorry. Yukun had always listened intently to my stories. This was the first time I could remember his attention wandering in the middle of a conversation. But my unease was relieved quickly enough. He apologized and listened to the rest of my story. I figured he must have just had something on his mind out there. And yet... Sachan, do you think there's a god? You know, one who knows everything and can do anything. If there's a god that's strong watching over us, even if things look really bad, it'll turn out okay in the end, right?
そうだね。私は神様を見たことがないから絶対にいるとは言えないけど、でも神頼みって言葉もあるくらいだし、神様はとっても強いんじゃないかな。
Nah, it's the other way around, Sachi. It's just that humans are so weak. Yeah, that's gotta be right. God's gotta be really powerful.
多分。
That's what I thought too. Thanks, Sachan. Sometimes, he'd suddenly talk about God or other weird stuff. More often, he'd sit rocking on a swing, staring off into the distance with a blank look on his face. It was the old familiar expression from the first time I met him. The expression he'd stopped making after we became friends. I had a vague idea that something must have happened at Yukun's home. But I was still just a kid, powerless to offer any real help. When Yukun asked me those questions, clearly searching for reassurance, all I could do was listen, nod, and try to hide my concern. At the same time, the blizzard of work that had buried my parents for so long was finally starting to slow down a bit. The machines weren't clattering quite as late into the night as they used to. Once or twice, I went home early to find my parents making small talk with strangers in suits. Like most kids, I did get pretty curious about what the adults were talking about. But when I eavesdropped, all I got was a whole bunch of words I didn't really understand flying back and forth. I got the idea they were talking about the machines in the workshop, but the specifics went right over my head. They're probably buying replacements for the old machines while it's not so busy. But only a few days after I reached that conclusion, our housekeeper told me she'd be leaving the job. Apparently, Mom told her she'd be able to handle the chores by herself again. It was nice that my parents were getting less busy, and that Mom would be looking after the house again, but at the time, my mind was so full of anxious thoughts of Yukun that I couldn't manage to feel happy about anything else. Lately, he'd been showing up at the playground a lot less frequently.
ねえねえゆうくん、次は何して遊ぶ？
Sorry, I've got something I have to do today. I have to head home now.
そっか。じゃあまた明日だね。
I don't think I can come tomorrow. But I'll play with you the day after that, okay?
わかった。じゃあまた明後日だね。
Yeah, sure. Bye, Sachan. Our meetings slowly grew fewer and further between. The loneliness reminded me of the painful days when my parents had first begun ignoring me in favor of their job. Watching helplessly as Yukun trudged away, my mind churned with sadness and fear. At this rate, Yukun's going to leave me too. I couldn't let that happen again. I couldn't let another person I loved abandon me. This time, I had to stop it somehow. The next time I saw Yukun, I decided to use my birthday as an excuse to coax him into spending more time with me.
あのね、明日は私の誕生日なんだ。
Oh, really?
うん。だから明日は私と一緒に遊んでくれる？
Actually, I probably won't be able to play with you for a while, Sachan. A bunch of stuff happened at home. I think it's gonna be hard for me to get outside from now on.
そんな、急にどうして？
Turns out, there isn't any such thing as God.
神様？
Yeah. Nobody's gonna protect me anymore. I probably won't be able to play in the park like this again.
そんな。
I'm sorry. I know I should have told you sooner, but... Sachan, you always look forward to playing with me. I didn't want to make you sad.
ゆうくん。
But vanishing suddenly without telling you would be even worse. So today, I came to say goodbye.
じゃあ、ゆうくんとはもう会えないの？
I don't know for sure, but it's definitely possible.
そんな。
And I snuck out of the house today, so I have to get back before Dad notices.
ねえ、明日は私の誕生日なんだよ。
I'm sorry I can't celebrate it with you, Sachan. Okay, I'm gonna go now.
待って、ゆうくん。どうしてもう一緒に遊べないの？私そんなのやだよ。せっかく仲良くなれて、これからもっともっとゆうくんと遊べると思ったのに。それなのに、突然お別れしなきゃいけないなんて。私、明日も待ってるから。ゆうくんが来てくれるまで、絶対、いつもの場所で待ってるから。
As Yukun slowly walked away for the very last time, I yelled at the top of my lungs, more loudly and more desperately than I ever had before in my entire life. But he never paused. He never turned back. Yukun's leaving me. Maybe I was right. Maybe everyone I love abandons me. Paralyzed by miserable self-pity, I couldn't even chase after him. For a long time after that abrupt farewell, I could only stand stock still at the entrance to the park, wallowing in confusion and pain. And on the morning of my 10th birthday, rubbing my red, swollen eyes as I crawled out of bed, I immediately realized that something was different. For one thing, I couldn't hear the droning of the machines that had been running from the early morning hours for months now. And for another, the smell of fresh miso soup was wafting through the air from the kitchen. Could that be Mom cooking? What about work? Still half asleep and completely nonplussed, I wandered over to the living room, where an unexpected sight was waiting for me.
Ohayo, Sachi.
Ohayo.
Mom and Dad were sitting next to each other on the far side of the table, almost as if they'd been waiting for me to wake up. After greeting me, they waited with gentle smiles for my answer. It almost felt like I was reliving a memory from the days before they'd become so busy. The sheer surprise was such that it took me a moment to find a response.
おはよう。
どうしたサチ？そんなに目を丸くして。
だって今日は機械の音がしないし、それにお父さんとお母さんがこの時間に家にいるなんて。
そうだな。自分たちのしてきたことを考えれば、サチが驚くのも無理はないか。
今までが今まででしたからね。
The two of them smiled sadly at each other, then turned right back to me.
サチ、今日はサチの誕生日だから、お仕事はお休みにしたの。
今まで寂しい思いをさせてしまった分の汚名を返上させてもらおうと思ってな。夜になってケーキを食べながら誕生日をお祝いするまで、今日はサチと一緒に遊ぼうと決めた。
The words coming out of their mouths were exactly what I'd been longing desperately to hear for so many months. It felt so much like a dream that I very nearly pinched myself. Mom and Dad would be at my side again, like they used to be. Just like when every day was full of happiness, we could play together as a family once more. That was what I'd wanted all along. Even while I was playing with Yukun, I had daydreamed countless times about this very moment. And now it was real. My parents were giving me the gentle, caring words I'd longed to hear. My heart should have been bursting with joy. And yet, what I felt instead was dark, intense anger, as though a hidden flame, long smoldering in some hidden cranny of my mind, had found the oxygen it needed to burst into a blazing wildfire. No matter how hard I tried, they completely ignored me. Why now all of a sudden? Do they seriously think taking one day off work is gonna make me forget how sad I've been all this time? Good luck with that. Yukun took their place, but now even he's gone. So why? Why now? Why do they think they can just... Cold black bitterness spreading through my body. I lifted my head to give my parents their answer.
いいよ。別に遊んでくれなくてもいい。私は一人でも平気だし、お父さんとお母さんが大好きなお仕事を休んでもらってまで一緒にいてもらおうなんて思わない。だからそんなに私の誕生日がお祝いしたいなら二人だけでやればいいんだよ。
The instant those sulky words left my mouth, I bolted out of the living room.
サチ！
待って、サチ！
They called out to me from behind, but I just kept running. Out the door, away from our house. Not that I was headed anywhere in particular. Anywhere would be fine, as long as Mom and Dad weren't there. I didn't want to see their faces. I didn't want to hear their voices. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me. My hands clenched tightly into fists, biting my lower lip until the sickening taste of iron filled my mouth. As I fled, the only thing in my mind was anger at my parents. Looking back on it now, it wasn't much more than an irrational outburst of pent-up emotion. But still, rather than feeling happy at their promise to celebrate my birthday together, I was outraged that my parents were wrapping up all the sadness and pain I'd felt for so long into those bland words about feeling lonely. And in the end, my blind, aimless flight carried me to that familiar playground. I hadn't consciously thought about making my way here. If anything, I was intentionally trying to stay away from the area close to my home. At some point, I definitely passed a hospital much further away than this place. Even so, some unconscious part of my mind had guided me to this destination. The impact of the previous day's events must have been just that strong. I couldn't simply accept that unbelievably abrupt goodbye. As Yukun left, I had screamed that I'd be waiting for him today. If I forced a one-sided promise on him, maybe he'd slip out of his house to see me. That selfish, childish hope was still alive inside me. Wiping the sweat from my forehead, I looked up to the tall clock tower nearby. It was a little past 10 in the morning. Yukun always came to the playground about 1:30 on weekends, but I decided I might as well start waiting now. That way, I'd be here even if Yukun came early. And if Mom and Dad showed up, I could always just run away again. Trying to disguise the pain and anxiety growing inside me, I forced myself to believe in this spur-of-the-moment plan. I walked over to the swing set, where the two of us had always sat side by side, and settled into my seat. The day before, I told Yukun I would wait for him in this park, but it wasn't like he promised to come play with me. He hadn't even responded to my words. There was no guarantee Yukun would come to this park. Still, I had absolute faith that he'd show up eventually, and I was pretty confident I could wait patiently until then. But as the clock's hour hand made its way past the 5, and my vigil approached its 8th hour, even that childish confidence began to waver. The playground that had always felt too small for us suddenly seemed an unbelievably large and empty place. Yukun had told me clearly enough that he couldn't play with me anymore, that even getting outside would be difficult from now on. Could he even make it to the park if he wanted to? Having regained the ability to think rationally with the passage of time, my mind ruthlessly chipped away at my unfounded confidence. And finally, I arrived at the realization that I'd backed myself into a miserable corner. Once that timid thought passed through my mind, it was only a matter of time. The painful emotions I'd been covering up with my anger came bubbling back to the surface. I was really mean to Mom and Dad again. They were gonna play with me, and I ruined everything. This isn't any different from last year. Even if I go home tonight, my birthday's just gonna be Mom and Dad yelling at me. With each thought, the anxiety and regret swelled up uncontrollably inside me. Before I knew it, fat tears were running down my cheeks. When I squeezed my eyes closed to shut out the world, I saw my parents in my mind's eye, their faces gentle and kind. No matter how lonely they'd meet me, and no matter how much I try to hate them for it, in the end, I still loved them both, very much. And in the moment I finally understood, I thought I could hear those same familiar voices. Not in my memories, but somewhere nearby. I raised my head with a jerk, indifferent now to the tears that continued to pour from my eyes. Outside the park, just on the other side of the road, I saw my mom and dad. Even from a distance, I could tell they were covered in sweat. They'd been desperately searching for me. Ah, mom and dad are still mom and dad after all. The people I love most in the whole world. I should have known that all along. Why couldn't I have accepted them from the start? No, there was no longer any point in even thinking about it. I was wrong. Now all I had to do was apologize. All I had to do was jump into their arms and yell, "I'm sorry for being so selfish."
お父さん、お母さん。
サチ。
Once the two of them noticed my presence, their expressions instantly melted with relief. I dashed out of the park, overwhelmed with happiness, and I hear a sudden roar of displaced air, like the sound of a fierce wind. In the next instant, the world before me was filled with a colossal jet-black blur. I heard the sound of something colliding with something else, then screeching to a halt nearby. I had reflexively squeezed my eyes shut. When I timidly opened them, I was greeted with the unimaginable. Mom and Dad were stretched out flat on the road's surface, almost as if sleeping face down. Dad didn't even stir, a machine with a dead battery. Mom twitched convulsively again and again, a broken toy. The blood pooling under their bodies crept slowly across the orange-tinted asphalt, dyeing the road a dusky red.
何これ。
Those agonized groans, so totally unlike any other sound I'd ever heard my mother make, filled me with a terror too pure and primal to express in words. My ears had begun to ring, as if to drown out the unpleasant sound of the truck's engine idling nearby. With every moment that passed, my breaths came faster and faster. I couldn't fully grasp what had just happened before my eyes. But instinctively, I understood that it was something so awful as to wipe everything that had come before into complete irrelevance. What do I do? What do I do? Right, I've got to call for help. At times like these, call 911 first. My mind was still capable of thinking about what I should do next. And yet, my body was frozen on the spot, as if physically rejecting the incomprehensible situation before me. At the sound of my name, I turned my eyes back to the ground. My mother was dragging herself slowly across the road toward me, desperately trying to communicate something.
お母さん、お母さん、お母さん。
The sight instantly reduced me to a panicked frenzy. All I could do now was shriek her name. Lifting her trembling upper body ever so slightly off the ground, she slowly raised her face, and then...
サチ、どうして。
And then she spoke those words. In that instant, I thought I could hear something snap inside me. As my body began to quiver uncontrollably, the world was covered in a black shroud. The split second after the buzzing drone inside my head finally went silent, I lost consciousness entirely. Apparently, a local passerby quickly reported the incident, and it wasn't long before the ambulances carried us away. Not that I remember any of that. When I opened my eyes for the next time, a full day had passed, and I was lying in a colorless hospital room.
サチ、目が覚めたのか。
I heard a chair scraping against the linoleum floor nearby. A moment later, a familiar face appeared before me.
秋広おじさん。
ああ、おじさんだ。それより体は大丈夫か。どこかが痛かったり気持ち悪かったりしないか。
I gingerly moved my arms and legs several times, but couldn't find anything wrong with my body.
大丈夫。
そうか、よかった。
My uncle smiled broadly at my words, tears in the corners of his eyes. Still a little dopey from waking up, I felt a simple curiosity about the intense emotions so evident in his face.
ねえ、おじさん。何かあったの？
When I put the question into words, my uncle averted his eyes, his expression filled with reluctance and pain.
お前の両親はな、サチ、事故にあったんだ。
事故。
As I dully repeated my uncle's words, a memory that had slipped cleanly from my mind slowly re-emerged. A small park, died in the light of the evening sun. The smell of burning rubber, the sound of a truck idling. And finally, Mom and Dad lying in pools of their own blood. The scene flashed before my eyes in perfect clarity. Reflexively, I tried to look away, but there was no escape, and in the next moment, my ears were filled with that awful droning buzz.
サチ、
My field of vision grew slowly narrower, and a choking sense of paralysis spread throughout my body. It felt as though my body temperature had suddenly plunged. A violent wave of nausea and a splitting headache attacked me all at once.
おいサチ、大丈夫か。
おじ
サチ。 先生、サチが目を覚ましたんですが、急に苦しみ出して。
As the world grew dim before my eyes, I could vaguely make out my uncle shouting desperately for someone's attention. Wait, now I can't see or hear anything. Oh, guess I'm fainting again. The instant the thought ran through my head, I plunged into nothingness. It would be a full 3 days before I woke up again. When the nurse noticed my eyes were open, she immediately called the doctor in charge, who conducted a quick examination on the spot. After determining that I wasn't so severely impaired as to cause difficulties in ordinary conversation, the doctor began to explain many things to me. Uncle Akihiro, who came running over to the hospital, soon joined in as well. That day, Mom and Dad had been in a traffic accident right before my eyes. Just as I ran out toward them, a truck with a drunk driver behind the wheel had barreled through the intersection, ignoring a red light. Hit head-on by the massive vehicle, which had been traveling at 60 kilometers an hour or more, my dad died instantly from massive blunt force trauma. Mom had miraculously survived, but at the moment, she was still unconscious, fighting for her life in critical condition. When I learned all this, I didn't cry in grief, and I didn't explode with anger against the man who had caused the accident. The words the doctor used were really hard to understand, so a lot of the conversation went over my head. That probably had something to do with it. But more than anything else, nothing about the situation felt remotely real to me.
やっぱりちゃんと動く。
That night, Finally alone in a darkened hospital room, I flexed my legs and arms thoughtfully. No matter how many times I tested it, my body didn't feel injured. I could move just as freely and easily as before. And maybe Dad was dead. Maybe Mom was lying unconscious somewhere in this hospital. But I hadn't seen either of them yet. So maybe everyone telling me about this accident was just lying. Maybe if I were to get up out of bed and head straight home, my parents would be waiting for me there. My thoughts persistently returned to these comforting, paper-thin theories.
お医者さんが嘘を言うはずないし。
And more importantly, in the depths of my mind, a clear memory remained. The instant my thoughts brushed against that fragment of the past, I could hear my heart throb violently in my chest. This time, the shrill buzzing that had accompanied the similar incident 3 days earlier was conspicuously absent. In exchange, the most severe headache of my life fell upon me with all the suddenness and force of an avalanche. The sharp burst of pain, as if my body was warning me not to touch an open wound, robbed me of the will to think. Then I'll just stop trying. I'm sick of fainting. As soon as I emptied my mind, the headache vanished with astonishing speed. My breaths came easier, and I could feel my heartbeat gradually returning to its normal rhythm.
違う。
There's something wrong with my body after all. Nothing like this ever happened to me before that day.
じゃあ、私の頭に残ってるあの光景は。
As my mind began to reach a conclusion I didn't want to accept, I involuntarily recalled the agony I had just endured. If I remember what happened, that pain will come back. The ensuing wave of terror wiped all else from my mind. Pulling the blankets over my head in search of refuge, I waited for the morning to come. Did that accident they keep talking about really happen? Several days later, that disbelief still lingering in my mind, I was taken to visit my mom in the intensive care unit for the first time. After carefully disinfecting my hands with alcohol, the nurses dressed me up in a hospital gown just like theirs, then finally ushered me into the room. And just as they told me, my mother was inside. But the person lying on the bed in front of me wasn't the mom I knew. There was a huge oxygen mask covering her mouth. Bandages were wrapped around her head. Numerous tubes were sticking out of her body, connecting her to all sorts of machines. The sight reminded me of nothing so much as the Frankenstein monsters I'd seen in movies. But this was reality. That day, the accident happened exactly as they told me. And now my mom was sleeping in the nest of machines. In the instant I finally perceived that undeniable fact as reality, I was struck by a powerful wave of nausea. The hospital room grew dark before me, and in that darkness, a fuzzy image flickered before my eyes, disappearing for the briefest of moments only to re-emerge. Like some pale, indistinct horror, bobbing up and down just beneath the surface of a muddy lake. Unable to endure the sickness swelling up from the core of my body, I vomited up the contents of my stomach on the spot, and was hastily carried out of the room by the nurse who'd accompanied me. After that, I tried to return to the ICU numerous times, but the outcome was always the same. The moment I saw my mother in her hospital bed, I experienced severe nausea and was quickly removed from the room. My doctor took these events very seriously and eventually forbid me from visiting mom for the time being. That night, I laid awake in bed until well after the lights had been turned out, unable to fall asleep. I hadn't suffered any real injury, so sitting around all day often left me with too much physical energy. Sometimes I would go on an entire day without feeling hungry, or lie awake in bed for hours. And today, the things I had heard during the daytime were also weighing heavily on my mind. I lay in my bed, staring up at the now familiar tiles in the ceiling, and thought about my parents.
もうこの世界にお父さんはいない。それにお母さんだって。
She might never open her eyes again. Sometimes, I'd overhear my uncle talking about it with the nurses in lower tones. Apparently, Mom was sick with something called a persistent vegetative state. From what I could figure out, that meant the possibility she'd wake up again was really, really low. Mom's going to be asleep forever and ever. In other words, I'd never be able to talk to her again. A bitter frustration welled up inside me at the thought.
やだ。そんなの嫌だよ。
But no matter how I tried to deny the reality, nothing would change. Even if my parents' job would no longer keep us apart, the blissful days I'd wished for would never return. The more I understood the situation, the heavier my despair grew. Tears spilled relentlessly from my eyes. My mind was filled with a miserable new question. Why? Why had it turned out like this?
あの日は私の誕生日だったのに、本当ならゆうくんと一日中遊んで、去年よりもずっと楽しい日になるはずだったのに。
But in reality, I hadn't been able to see him. And because of that sudden accident, Dad was dead, and Mom was sleeping forever. Everything I loved had been taken from me in one horrible instant.
どうしてこんなことになったの？私こんなの嫌だよ。どうして？
When I squeezed my eyes shut in an attempt to escape the cruel reality of my situation, I thought I heard someone's voice in my mind.
ねえサチ、どうしてあの時家を飛び出してしまったの？どうしていい子にしていてくれなかったの？お母さんもお父さんもトラックにはねられて、とてもとても痛かったのよ。
Since the day I accepted that the accident had really happened, these feelings had been lurking, unacknowledged in the depths of my mind. That accident happened because of me. If I'd listened to my parents and stayed in the house, they wouldn't have been in the street when that truck ran the red light. Even Yukun, I selfishly tried to manipulate him into coming to the park. Maybe that's why he didn't show up. Maybe he just finally got sick of me. In other words,
全部私のせいだ。
as I spoke those words, the ringing in my ears returned for the first time in a while, harsher and shriller than ever before.
何これ。
A dull paralysis spread through my body, very similar to what I used to experience before fainting from overexertion in the playground. But the venomous chill crawling up my spine clearly signified that this was something else entirely. Something shadowy and unfamiliar and malevolent was attacking my body. My heart thumped violently in my chest, and in that moment, the world froze around me. The air wasn't cold. It was solid ice, so frigid as to cause physical pain. My clenched teeth began to chatter loudly. My mouth opened wide. I desperately gulped down oxygen in little gasps, every breath a painful struggle. I was wrong, and something even worse is coming next. The voice rang out in my mind again, as I knew it would. And so, the nightmares began.
どうさっちゃん、今日は食べられる？
I think I'm gonna have to call it an episode right here. Throughout the first part of the flashback, to some degree, you could say that if we were trying to objectively say these experiences, you could say that Machina had it worse, technically, because she had to endure watching her dad decay and rot in front of her face. But we can't really be comparing apples to apples in a situation like this. Machina was never really subjected to the very warm and happy family life, while Sachi has actually tasted, a family that was very nice and happy. So the experience of them dying, and probably the self-guilt of thinking that they got killed because of herself, is probably very severe. Basically, I guess it depends on people's defense mechanism. For Machina, she denied what happened. And, kinda blamed herself, but never really did anything. She paralyzed herself. But for Sachi, I think she's doing something else to prevent herself from thinking about the matter again. In Amane's case, she was the most normal out of everyone, really, in comparison. She was just trying to seek, what's the word? Salvation by trying to be punished by someone. For me, personally, I was in a similar state as Sachi back when I was younger. Heck, I was also in a similar state as Yuji about thinking about, asking whether God was real or not. I was a meager 7 years old when my mom died. But yeah, to some degree, my thought pattern back in the day was also like, I probably caused it to some degree. But of course, looking at it now, objectively, I know for a fact that I was just a kid, and while sure, we could have prevented something, or it's nice to think about what ifs, the reality is, it's just not gonna happen. And after finding out about more facts in the future, I know for a fact about what caused the death much more clearly than what I thought was the cause when I was younger. Sorry, I'm kind of babbling on. But yeah, I'm gonna end the episode right here. I'm gonna go make some food, and I also had to pray downstairs. It's a Buddhist tradition right now to pray for the dead. Speaking of that, my family is actually downstairs. They probably already prayed. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. This episode will be out on Patreon first. I'm sorry for people on Patreon. Like I said, I was actually playing on Digimon Survive the past week, so I wasn't really making as much Grisaia stuff as usual. But if you guys enjoyed it, give it a like. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe and all that. And I will see you next time. I'll be doing 2 more episodes though for this week. technically next week for you guys on YouTube, but you know how it is. So, I'll see you guys in a bit.